Anderson is now the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, reaching agreement today on a 3-year, $150 million extension that raises the bar for all non-quarterbacks across the league. Anderson is somebody that the Texans obviously prioritized in keeping. They already had picked up his 5th-year option. He's 24, will turn 25 this September, and the Houston Texans have locked him in for 3 additional years, meaning he's contractually tied to Houston for the next 5 years. One of the most underrated players in all of football, but no longer paid like one. The highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history is now Will Anderson.
Mina, when we last saw Will Anderson on a football field, he was dominating the New England Patriots in what turned out to be a playoff loss.
Will Anderson Jr. is now the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of professional football. $150 million. 3 years. $134 million guaranteed. And if you are surprised by that number, if that figure feels bigger than you expected for a player you have been hearing about but never fully seeing, that is exactly the problem this contract is correcting. Will Anderson has been one of the 3 best pass rushers in this entire league since the day he stepped on an NFL field. And the fact that it took until now for his bank account to reflect that is the most glaring example of defensive player undervaluation this sport has produced in years. But before we build the full case for why Anderson has earned every cent of this deal, and then some, we need to talk about a specific statistical reality that is going to reframe the way you see this contract completely. Because the number Anderson sits at in pass rush production since entering the league should be stopping every conversation about whether he deserves this money before it even starts. Plus, we are going to get into the detail buried inside this contract that almost nobody is talking about, the one that changes how defensive superstars will negotiate their deals for the next decade. And we will get to the uncomfortable question this contract forces the Houston Texans to answer, because locking in Anderson at this price creates a roster construction challenge that could determine whether this team contends or regresses. Stay locked in, because this story is bigger than one player getting paid. Here is the foundation you need. Will Anderson Jr. came out of Alabama in the 2023 draft as one of the most polished pass rushers the college game had seen in years. The Texans selected him 2nd overall, and immediately around him, the national conversation was dominated by the franchise they were building around C.J. Stroud, the offensive explosion they were generating week after week, and the coaching brilliance of DeMeco Ryans. Anderson was there. He was performing. He was producing. He was doing everything a franchise building block does from day one. And the rest of the football world was mostly talking about everything else. That dynamic, the elite player doing elite work in a context that keeps redirecting the spotlight, is the story of Will Anderson's first 2 NFL seasons. And the production that was being quietly compiled while the cameras pointed elsewhere has now been quantified in a way that demands acknowledgement. Since entering the league in 2023, Anderson ranks 3rd among all pass rushers in ESPN's pass rush win rate metric. 3rd in the entire league. At his position, in his first 2 years. The 2 players above him are Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett, names that are referenced constantly in the conversation about the NFL's elite defensive players, names that generate highlight packages and debate segments and social media arguments on a weekly basis. Will Anderson is right there with both of them, and it gets more impressive when you look at the downstream impact of his pressure. In the time he has been rushing the passer at that elite rate, Anderson's pressures have led directly to 91 interceptions for the Texans' defense. 91. Quarterback pressures that disrupted timing, forced throws, created turnovers, the kind of downstream defensive value that does not always show up in the sack column, but absolutely shows up in the win-loss record of the team he plays for. This is not a player who looks good on the highlight reel, but disappears in meaningful situations. This is a player whose impact radiates outward to every other piece of the defense around him. And he is 24 years old. Now here is where it gets really interesting.
I mean, he's such a complete player, but the pass rush production speaks for itself. Since coming into the league in 2023, he ranks 3rd amongst all pass rushers behind only Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett in ESPN's pass rush win rate metric. He has created 91 interceptions in that time with his pressures on the quarterback, by the way. So getting this deal done was a no-brainer for, a high-character, productive player like Anderson. And, of course, that 4-man rush is the identity of this Texans team. I mean, you alluded to their performance in the playoffs. It is what the whole identity of that defense is built around.
There's a detail buried inside Will Anderson's contract that is going to quietly reshape how the best defensive players in this league approach their next negotiations, and almost nobody is giving it the attention it deserves. Will Anderson just became only the second defensive player in NFL history to have a no-trade clause written into his contract. The first was Myles Garrett. Think about what that means in the context of professional football's historical power structure. Quarterbacks have had no-trade clauses for years. Star offensive players have negotiated them with increasing frequency. But defensive players, even elite ones, even franchise-defining ones, have historically operated without that specific layer of contractual protection. The no-trade clause is a statement. It says this player has enough leverage and enough value to this organization that the team will formally commit to keeping him, not just in terms of salary, but in terms of organizational intention. Both no-trade clauses on defensive players are now held by pass rushers. Both are represented by the same agent, Nicole Lynn of Clutch Sports. And the precedent being established here is not subtle. The next elite defensive player who reaches the market with real leverage is going to look at Anderson's contract and Garrett's contract and walk into their negotiation with a very clear template for what organizational commitment looks like when the franchise genuinely believes in you. This is Will Anderson not just getting paid. This is Will Anderson paying it forward to every elite defensive player who comes behind him. That is legacy-level contract work, and it deserves to be recognized as such. Now, let us talk about what Anderson's production means for the Houston Texans as a franchise, because this is where the story transitions from celebration to genuine strategic complexity. Houston has now committed historic money to Will Anderson. They are also paying Danielle Hunter, one of the most effective veteran edge rushers in the league, as the fifth highest paid player at his position. That is 2 premium contracts on the defensive line for a franchise that is simultaneously building around a young quarterback who's going to need to be paid, surrounded with weapons, and supported with the kind of roster depth that sustains winning over multiple seasons rather than one hot year followed by regression. The Texans have a good problem. That is the honest framing. The good version of this problem is that they have assembled enough elite defensive talent to build a defense that can carry them through games where the offense struggles. The 4-man rush that has become the identity of Houston's defense is genuinely terrifying for opposing offensive coordinators, and Anderson is the engine that makes it work. When Anderson is winning one-on-one and Hunter is winning on the other side, and the interior is generating push, the Texans can be an elite defensive unit without needing exotic blitz packages or scheme complexity. They can just line up and beat you. But the challenging version of this problem is the salary cap reality that follows every major contract commitment in the modern NFL. Anderson's extension runs for 5 years total when you include the 2 years already on his rookie deal that Houston structured into the package. Hunter's deal is shorter. Stingley Jr. got his market-setting money last offseason. And C.J. Stroud, who is performing at a level that will command massive quarterback money, has his own extension conversation coming in the not-too-distant future. The Texans cannot simply keep writing historic checks and expect the roster to sustain itself through depth and attrition. The teams that fall off the contender map fastest are almost always the ones that lock up their stars brilliantly and then fail to nail the draft picks that fill the gaps around those stars on rookie contracts. That is the Lions story from last season. That is the cautionary tale sitting directly in front of Houston's front office right now as the draft approaches. Which means this contract, as justified and deserved as it is, also raises the stakes for every draft pick Houston makes in the next 3 years. They need those picks to hit. They need to find contributors in the middle rounds who can produce at a high level without premium compensation, because the premium compensation budget has been spoken for by players who have unambiguously earned it. Here is the take that the NFL world is not saying loudly enough about Will Anderson Jr., and this is where Gridiron Insights plants its flag completely. Anderson is not just one of the 3 best pass rushers in the league right now. He is on track to be the best pass rusher in the league within the next 2 seasons. And the reason that statement is not already consensus is the same reason he has been undervalued for 2 years: context and spotlight. Micah Parsons gets the spotlight because he plays in Dallas and the Cowboys are a media machine. Myles Garrett gets the spotlight because the tragedy narrative of his career, the wasted prime years on a losing team, has been covered extensively and generates enormous emotional investment. Will Anderson plays in Houston, which is not a media center, surrounded by a defense that is genuinely excellent as a unit rather than a collection of individual superstars, and with a franchise narrative that centers on its young quarterback. But strip away the market, the narrative, the spotlight distribution, and look purely at the football. Anderson at 24 is producing at a level that only 2 players in the entire league are currently matching. He has a no-trade clause. He has 5 years of security in Houston. He has a defensive scheme built specifically to maximize what he does. And he has barely scratched the surface of what his peak looks like. The $150 million is not a reflection of who Will Anderson has been. It is a bet on who Will Anderson is about to become. And based on everything the first 2 years of his career have shown, is the safest bet the Houston Texans have ever placed. Here is the bottom line. Will Anderson Jr. is now the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. He earned it. He earned it by being the most underrated elite pass rusher in professional football for 2 straight seasons while doing everything his team needed him to do at the highest level. The contract is deserved. The no-trade clause is historic. And the player receiving it is 24 years old with his best football still ahead of him. My prediction, within 2 seasons, Will Anderson Jr. is not just the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. He is being discussed as the best defensive player in football. The contract becomes the bargain of the decade. If you want to follow Anderson's journey as he steps fully into the spotlight his production has always deserved, hit that subscribe button right now. And drop a comment below. Do you think Will Anderson Jr. is already better than Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett? Or does he still have something left to prove before that conversation is official? This is Gridiron Insights. We'll see you in the next one.